Spend 15 years on something everyone says will never work. Get rejected 300 times. Lose your house, your savings, everything. Would you keep going? James Dyson did. And what he built didn't just change how we clean our homes. It rewrote the rules of an entire industry that didn't want to change. This is the story of patent US 4593429A, the bagless vacuum cleaner. But really, it's about something bigger. It's about why the best ideas often face the most resistance, and what happens when one person refuses to accept that no means never. Let's go back to 1979. Dyson wasn't trying to revolutionize anything. He was just annoyed. He'd bought an expensive vacuum cleaner for his home in the English countryside. Top of the line, best money could buy. And it was terrible. The suction kept dropping. He'd changed the bag, and for a few minutes it worked great. Then the power would fade again. He opened it up to see what was happening. The bag was barely half full, but the pores in the fabric were already clogged with fine dust. The air couldn't get through. No airflow meant no suction. Simple physics. Terrible design. Most people would have just bought a different vacuum. Dyson couldn't let it go. See, he wasn't just some guy with a vacuum problem. He was an engineer who'd recently designed something called the ball barrow, a wheelbarrow with a ball instead of a wheel. He understood products, he understood manufacturing, and he understood when something was designed wrong on purpose. Because here's the thing about bagged vacuums. They weren't badly designed by accident. They were brilliantly designed for the business model. The vacuum itself, that was just the setup. The real money was in the bags. Customers had to keep buying them forever. It was the razor and blades model before anyone called it that. Vacuum companies loved bags. Bags were predictable recurring revenue. Dyson saw the scam. But more importantly, he saw the solution. He'd been working with industrial sawmills, and they used something called cyclonic separation to extract dust from the air. A spinning cone of air that used centrifugal force to fling particles to the outside, while clean air escaped from the center. No filter needed. No clogging. Just physics. What if you could scale that down? What if you could put that technology into a vacuum cleaner? He built the first prototype in his workshop. Cardboard and tape. It looked ridiculous, but it worked. The suction didn't drop. He ran it until the chamber was full, and it still pulled just as hard as when it was empty. He'd done it. He'd solved the problem. That's when the real story begins. Because solving the problem was the easy part. Dyson needed money to develop the idea properly, to turn a cardboard prototype into something you could manufacture and sell. So he did what any inventor would do. He went to the vacuum companies. Hoover, Electrolux, the big names. He showed them the technology. He explained how much better it was. He offered to license the patent. They all said no. Not just no, but absolutely not. And here's why. Dyson's invention threatened to kill the most profitable part of their business. In the UK alone, vacuum bags were a $200 million market. In the US, it was $500 million. These companies made more money selling bags than selling vacuums. Why would they cannibalize that? One executive told him directly, "This changes nothing for us except our profit margin." Another said, "If this is as good as you say, we definitely don't want it." They weren't interested in making better vacuums. They were interested in protecting the bag business. Dyson tried licensing it in Europe, in America, everywhere. 300 rejections. Not exaggerating. Literally 300 companies said no. And these weren't form letter rejections. These were meetings, presentations, demonstrations. He'd fly to another country, show them the working prototype, watch their engineers admit it was better, and then get turned down anyway. The money ran out. He'd been living off the ball barrow earnings, but that dried up. He maxed out his credit cards, took out loans against his house. His wife was a teacher, and her salary was the only steady income keeping the family afloat. Friends stopped calling because they were tired of hearing about the vacuum that would never happen. His own family thought he'd lost his mind. But here's what kept him going. Every rejection taught him something. The engineers at these companies would point out flaws in the design. The prototypes would fail in specific ways, and Dyson would go back to his workshop and fix those problems. He built 5,127 prototypes over those 15 years. Not 5,000 variations. 5,000 complete rebuilds, each one slightly different. Each one testing a new idea. Most of those prototypes made things worse. That's not a failure of the process. That's the process. You try things, most don't work, and the ones that do work get you one step closer. Dyson wasn't lucky. He was systematic. He kept detailed notes on every single prototype. What changed, what happened, what it meant. The cyclone design evolved. Early versions had one big cyclone. That worked okay for large debris, but struggled with fine dust. So he added a second stage with smaller cyclones spinning faster to catch the smaller particles. That worked better, but still wasn't perfect. He kept adding stages, refining the geometry, adjusting the airflow. By the end, he had multiple cyclones working in sequence, each one capturing progressively finer particles. The patent itself, US 4593429A, was filed in 1983. It covers a vacuum cleaning apparatus with a dirt collection chamber, a dirt separation chamber, and a cleaning air inlet. Sounds simple when you read the legal language, but the elegance is in how it works. Air gets sucked in, spun in the first cyclone to remove big stuff, then passed through progressively smaller cyclones to remove finer and finer particles. The clean air exits at the center. The dirt falls into the collection bin. No bags, no filters to clog, no loss of suction. The patent was granted in 1986. Finally, legal protection for the idea. But a patent without a product is just expensive paper. And Dyson still had no way to manufacture it. That's when he made a decision that most people thought was insane. If no one would license his technology, he'd manufacture it himself. He'd start his own company, build his own factory, compete directly with the giants who'd rejected him. Everyone told him this was impossible. He had no manufacturing experience at scale, no distribution network, no brand recognition, no retail relationships, and he was trying to enter a mature market dominated by companies with 100-year head starts and billions in resources. The conventional wisdom was clear. Don't compete with established players in a commodity market. You'll lose. Dyson ignored all of it. He took out more loans, convinced a few investors to take a chance, rented factory space, hired engineers who believed in the idea. And in 1993, 14 years after that first cardboard prototype, the Dyson DC-01 went on sale in the UK. It cost twice as much as conventional vacuums. It looked weird, with the transparent bin showing all the dirt inside. The design was industrial, colorful, nothing like the boring beige boxes people were used to. Every design choice was controversial. Every marketing decision went against industry norms, and it became the best-selling vacuum cleaner in the UK in less than 2 years. People got it immediately. You didn't have to explain cyclonic separation or centrifugal force. You just had to show them. Look, no bags to buy. Watch, the suction doesn't drop. See all the dirt it's picking up that your old vacuum missed. The transparent bin wasn't just a design choice. It was proof. You could see the technology working. The vacuum companies that rejected Dyson suddenly had a problem. He wasn't just taking market share. He was changing what customers expected. People started asking why they needed to keep buying bags. Why should suction decrease as the bag fills? Why can't all vacuums work like that? Hoover panicked and released a bagless vacuum. It looks suspiciously similar to Dyson's design. Too similar. Dyson sued for patent infringement. The case went on for years. Hoover's defense was that the patent was obvious, that cyclonic separation was old technology, that anyone could have done this. The court didn't buy it. If it was so obvious, why didn't Hoover do it in the 100 years they'd been making vacuums? Why did they reject Dyson's offer to license it? Dyson won. Hoover paid millions in damages. Other companies tried to copy it too. Electrolux, Vax, all the names that said no came back with their own bagless versions. Dyson spent years in court protecting the patent. He won most of those cases. Not all, but enough. And here's the thing about those legal battles. They weren't about the money. They were about the principle. These companies had 300 chances to get in early. They chose protection over innovation. They bet that the bag business was more valuable than better technology. They were wrong. By 2005, Dyson was selling in dozens of countries. The company was doing over $1 billion in revenue. Dyson himself was a billionaire. The DC-01 had evolved into multiple product lines. Uprights, handhelds, cordless models. Each one pushing the technology further. More cyclones, more power, better filtration. The competition was constantly playing catch-up. But here's what makes this story bigger than one successful product. Dyson didn't stop at vacuums. He took the same approach to hand dryers, creating the air blade. To fans, creating the bladeless air multiplier. To hair dryers, creating the supersonic. Every time, he looked at a mature market with established players and asked, why does it work this way? Could it work better? The vacuum was proof of concept. Proof that you could challenge industry giants if you had better technology and enough stubbornness to outlast the rejection. Proof that patents matter, that protecting your innovation gives you the space to build a business around it. Proof that customers will pay more for products that genuinely work better. Patent US 4593429A expired in 2006. After that, anyone could use the cyclonic separation design. The technology became public domain. And you know what happened? The entire vacuum industry shifted to bagless designs. The thing that 300 companies rejected became the industry standard. Not because Dyson convinced them, because customers demanded it. Walk into any store now and try to find a high-end vacuum with bags. They barely exist. Bagless is default. The $200 million bag market in the UK? Gone. The $500 million US market? Collapsed. Dyson's invention didn't just create a successful company. It killed an entire product category. There's a lesson in that about how industries resist change. The vacuum companies weren't stupid. They correctly identified that bagless technology would hurt their bag sales. Where they miscalculated was thinking they could prevent the change by refusing to adopt it. They thought controlling the present meant controlling the future. But technology doesn't ask permission. Better products find a way to market, even if they have to create their own path. Dyson's story gets taught in engineering schools now. Not because of the technology, though the cyclone design is elegant, but because of the process. 5,000 prototypes, 300 rejections, 15 years of development. That's not a story about genius. It's a story about persistence past the point where persistence makes sense. Most people would have quit after 10 rejections, after 50, after losing their house. The rational decision at almost every point was to give up. Cut your losses, move on. The sunk cost fallacy says you shouldn't keep investing in a losing proposition. But Dyson didn't see it as a losing proposition. He saw a problem that needed solving and a solution that worked. The market rejection wasn't evidence that the idea was bad. It was evidence that the market was structured to resist good ideas. There's something important there about the difference between invention and innovation. Invention is creating something new. Innovation is getting people to use it. Dyson did both, but the second part was harder. The technology worked from the early prototypes. Making people care, building a business, fighting off copycats, that took another decade. The patent system gets criticized a lot. Too slow, too expensive, too easy to work around. But this story shows why it matters. Without patent protection, Dyson couldn't have fought Hoover. He couldn't have stopped the copycats. The big companies would have just cloned the design and used their distribution advantages to crush him. The patent gave him a weapon. Not a guarantee of success, but a fighting chance. Today, Dyson employs thousands of engineers. The company spends millions on research and development every year. They've moved beyond home appliances into things like electric vehicles and battery technology. James Dyson himself is one of the richest people in the UK, but he still talks about those 15 years in the workshop. Still keeps prototype number 1 on display at company headquarters. Still tells new engineers about the 300 rejections. Because that's the part that matters, not the success. The rejection, the failure, the prototypes that didn't work. That's where the learning happens. That's where the innovation comes from. Success is just what happens when you survive long enough for the world to catch up to your idea. Think about what almost didn't happen. If Dyson had quit after 100 rejections, we'd still be buying vacuum bags. If he'd taken a job at one of the companies that rejected him, the technology would have sat in a drawer somewhere gathering dust. If he'd decided to work on something else, something easier, something that didn't require fighting the entire industry, none of this happens. The bagless vacuum wasn't inevitable. It required someone to be unreasonable enough to keep going when every reasonable person said stop. It required betting everything on an idea that 300 companies evaluated and passed on. It required believing that you're right and the entire market is wrong. That's not advice anyone should give lightly. Most people who think the market is wrong are just wrong. Most ideas that get rejected 300 times deserve it. Most inventors who bet everything lose everything. Dyson's story is exceptional precisely because it's rare. Survivor bias is real. For every Dyson, there are thousands of inventors who went broke chasing ideas that never panned out. But here's the thing. The ideas that change things are always the ones that face resistance. Easy ideas get implemented fast. Hard ideas take time because they threaten existing systems. The bigger the threat, the stronger the resistance. If 300 companies tell you no, maybe you're wrong. Or maybe you're threatening something valuable enough that they'll fight to stop you. Telling the difference is the hard part. Dyson had working prototypes. He had physics on his side. He had demonstrable proof that the technology performed better. That's different from just believing your idea is good. Evidence matters. Testing matters. Those 5,000 prototypes weren't just persistence. They were validation. Each one proved something about what worked and what didn't. The patent document itself is dense. 16 pages of technical specifications and diagrams. Claims about dirt separation chambers and frusto-conical members. Legal language designed to protect the broadest possible interpretation of the idea. But buried in there is something simple. A better way to remove dirt from air. That's it. That's what 15 years and 5,000 prototypes and 300 rejections were about. Removing dirt from air more effectively. Sometimes the biggest innovations are just solving simple problems that everyone else decided to live with. The vacuum industry lived with bags because bags worked well enough and made good money. Customers complained about losing suction, but not enough to stop buying vacuums. The problem was tolerable. Dyson made it intolerable by showing what the alternative looked like. That's how markets shift. Not through incremental improvement, but through demonstrations of what's possible. Once people saw a vacuum that never lost suction, going back felt like a downgrade. The bag vacuum didn't get worse. The standard got higher. This happens in every industry. Someone shows what's possible, and suddenly the old way isn't acceptable anymore. Smartphones made flip phones obsolete. Streaming made cable feel ancient. Electric cars are doing it to gas engines now. The pattern repeats. The technology exists before the market adopts it. There's always a gap. Someone has to cross that gap, usually at great personal cost, usually against massive resistance. Dyson crossed it. 300 companies guarded one side. He built a bridge anyway. Not because he was braver or smarter or more visionary. Because he couldn't let go of the fact that his vacuum sucked, in the bad way, and he knew how to fix it. Patent US 4593429A is expired now. The technology is free. Anyone can use cyclonic separation in their vacuum designs. Dyson doesn't own it anymore, but he didn't need to own it forever. He needed it long enough to build a company that could survive competition, long enough to establish a brand, long enough to prove the market was bigger than anyone thought. The vacuum companies were wrong about bags being essential. They were wrong about customers not paying more for better performance. They were wrong about being able to ignore the technology. They were right about one thing though. Bagless vacuums did kill the bag business. They just couldn't stop it from happening. There's a version of this story where Dyson sells the patent to Hoover in year 5, takes a licensing deal, makes some money, moves on with his life. Hoover releases a bagless vacuum in 1985 instead of fighting it for decades. The technology spreads faster. Maybe that's better for everyone. Maybe Dyson regrets not taking that path on hard days during those 15 years. But that story doesn't create Dyson the company, doesn't inspire a generation of engineers to keep going past rejection, doesn't prove that individuals can still challenge corporations if they're willing to pay the cost. That story is easier but smaller. The story we got is harder and bigger. A patent rejected 300 times until one yes changed everything. Except it wasn't really one yes. It was one man refusing to accept 300 no's, building 5,000 prototypes, losing his house, betting everything, and being right. That's the story of US 4593429A, a bagless vacuum cleaner. Better technology that the market didn't want until it couldn't live without. An invention that became an innovation because someone was stubborn enough to make it happen. And a reminder that the best ideas often look like the worst ideas right up until the moment they don't. If that got you thinking, check out the next one.